teleconferencing solution for your organization, a solution that looks great and sounds good every time. And so to help me with that, we've got John sitting here with us, but I also want to introduce two other members of our team. One is Nathan Tomberlin. He's one of our account executives, and Nathan is going to be helping us with this. And then also Gage Helton, one of our engineers, is also on the call. You guys want to say hello?
Hey, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
Great. And so we're so glad to have you guys with us today. Thanks so much for kind of walking us through this. I do want to say that today we're going to be using virtual reality to demonstrate some of the things we're going to be talking about today, some of the products and some of the different ideas we're talking about. And so Nathan is actually currently in our VR environment working. Nathan, can you tell us a little bit about VR and how we're using it at S&L to improve our customer experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the, obviously, we've been trying to figure out new ways to improve our customer experience, and also some ways to kind of streamline designs and communication and be able to demonstrate how technology works in meeting spaces, training spaces, any type of room environment that uses technology. And we picked up this platform and started using this. This has been very helpful because as you'll see kind of throughout the demonstration, it offers ways to be able to see, things that you may not necessarily see if you're, just doing a quick drawing for a room. We actually have the ability to put goggles on you or bring you into a video call remotely, build out your space in real time, and show how technology is going to impact your room and how you would use them. From projector screens to display sizes to office furniture, anything that's going to make that space come to life, we're able to demonstrate that in this environment.
Great, thanks, Nathan. With so many people during this time working remotely and having to adjust to a new reality with our current situation we're in related to the coronavirus pandemic. There's been so much said and done related to video conferencing. And so we want to talk a little bit about that today. I'm sure that many of you have heard about different options, different brands, different companies that do video conferencing. And there's different things to consider when your business is trying to select the right platform. And so, Gage, if you could talk to us for just a minute about some of the differences in video conference platforms and what things customers may need to consider when they're approaching this decision.
Sure. So, video conferencing allows you to reach out to your teams remotely, and that's really important, especially now. There are a ton of options out there, and we're going to talk about a couple different things. There's two basic types of conferencing. You have hard codec versions and soft codec versions, and basically all that means is hard codec versions have dedicated hardware that allow you to do the conferencing, and soft codec versions are software. Different platforms like Zoom and a company we use, StarLeaf, and other things like that. And, so basically, that's what we're discussing here. And the pitfalls that people need to consider are that, people tend to change their mind a lot when it comes to teleconferencing, and they use a lot of different things. And, one week it's Microsoft Teams, next week it's Zoom and things like that. And so you want to make sure that your solutions in meeting spaces are nice and robust and can handle different things like that, or that your company or group of people that are meeting kind of standardize on a platform. That's one of the biggest pitfalls people run into. And the thing I think people need to be most aware of, regardless of the technology, you need to be consistent. So that the experience is consistent. And a lot of people do this very well, because it's such a mature technology at this point. So let's quickly discuss the difference between a soft and a hard codec. In a typical meeting space, you would have a TV on a wall, and you would have some speakers in the ceiling, and you might have, a microphone on the table and things like that. These systems are typically going to be hard codec integrated, meaning they have a dedicated conferencing system. Now, the positives of this is that it's always going to be the same. You're going to have a consistent experience, and you're not going to have to fight with the technology because it's meant to operate in that space the way that it sits. There are alternatives called AV bridges that would allow a user to bring their own soft codec into a meeting space. So you could bring your laptop in and you could have your Zoom or your StarLeaf or your Microsoft Teams meeting right there in the room with your own device. So there's a lot of different options. Reid, do you want to specifically touch on any of those things? in more depth?
Yeah, I think if we could just talk a little more specifically about how S&L uses the technology, and we do a lot of hard codec installs. Talk about some of the partners that we use to make that reality.
Sure. We partner very closely with a company called StarLeaf. They're based in the United Kingdom. They have an excellent uptime. They boast 99.9% uptime. So that basically means that your calls are not going to suffer in quality or drop, like you would have with a consumer product such as FaceTime or even the Zooms and even in some cases the Microsoft Teams of the world. So they are a specific conferencing company. That's all they do. They don't dabble in other, pieces of software, and they're dedicated to that. They build specific items for iOS, and I think they have an Android app as well as Windows and Mac OS. So you can have the same experience across all your devices. And it specifically comes in handy in meeting spaces because when you have a large conference room, you don't want to rely on a laptop to do your conferencing. You want to have something dedicated. So they build basically what's the equivalent of a set-top box that has video inputs and outputs for you to integrate with all of your room's internal presentation items. So if you have a room that's set up to do presentation already, you can bring that computer share content in. You can bring custom microphones in. You can have custom speaker solutions and all those sorts of things. So it makes the experience really nice and usable over the long term. Yeah,
that's great. And a very secure platform. Correct.
Absolutely. So, and I'm not going to name any competitors' names that have had issues with user leakage and data has been stolen. No plugs there, but we will say that StarLeaf is extremely secure. They care very much about their corporate clients, making sure that they are safe, all their data is safe, and that they're not leaking any information. They don't have any backdoor dealerships where they're selling data. This is 100% upfront, and we trust them very much.
That's great. Hey, Nathan, looks like things are going pretty good in VR. Looks like you got a basic room set up there. One of the things, kind of the big centerpiece in almost any conference space or presentation room is the display. It's what people are going to be looking at. It's going to be how they're going to be taking in a lot of the information. So could you talk to us just briefly about different types of display options in these conference rooms and presentation spaces?
Yeah, I actually just unplugged my headset, so give me 2 seconds for this thing to pop back in. There we go. All right. So I actually modeled this room. It is not to scale, but it's as close as I can get from memory. The conference room in our headquarters location in Thomasville, Georgia. And one of the coolest things to me is about using virtual reality is just the ability, like I mentioned earlier, in real time to be able to see, the differences in display types. There's a lot of variables that come into play to be able to make those decisions. It's not as simple as just saying, hey, I want to throw a 75-inch TV up on the wall because I think it's going to work. So just to give an example, I'm going to do just that. If I'm walking into a room and I say, hey, I think a 75-inch TV will be fine. In some rooms it may be. There's a 75-inch TV. Let's get over here to perspective. And hey, John, if you would mind moving just take a quick couple steps back with your virtual reality guy, other way. One more. There you go. It's about right where I'm at. So I can show some quick graphic content on this. Let's throw the game up, right? All right, so there's the game. Okay, this was Patriots versus Chiefs Super Bowl game. So it already looks kind of small, but if I'm just looking at that or, some other graphics, initially I'm going to say, okay, cool, yeah, I can see it. Well, as soon as I throw a presentation, you immediately can no longer see small text, which is going to be a problem for your executives or anyone sitting at the head of the table or really for anyone else for that matter, because it's just too small for the room. I can immediately take this size of display and let's go to 85-inch display or 87. 85, there we go, close enough. You still can't really, see the text in a room this size. So we're going to go ahead and just toss displays, a single display out the window and test out, and see what a projector screen may look like. Here is a 110-inch projector screen. First thing that you notice, that's a huge difference, and I'll show you this just by putting a display next to it. It doesn't do it 100% accurately, but this actually shows us the variables in the room, which are ambient light. So behind the view that you can't see, we've actually got some daylight coming into this room represented, and we've got incandescent fixtures in the ceiling. And you notice the display is obviously emitting light, and this one's reflecting light from a projector. So let me actually drop in a projector just for the visual. Here we go. So we got a projector in the room, and it's projecting. Now I can show you this by turning off the lights. As soon as I dim the lights, it gets a little bit better, and I can even drop the shades. That'll take about 20 seconds to completely drop. And it slowly gets better. It's still not going to be as great as a display. So with this, we can say, okay, well, that looks good. The text is still a little bit small. Maybe I want to see what an LED video wall looks like. And then I can come in and bring in my, an LED product and then scale this up. This is going to, with video wall products, they're basically tiles, and you can make them as large as you'd like them to be. So this would be an example of just showing, from in a room this size, from a distance of 30 feet away, roughly 25, 30 feet away, you're able to start seeing text as you start scaling this up. Let's make it even bigger. This is going to be even more critical in areas of such as like government, hospitals, areas, that are going to, you may need to be able to see something that's mission critical on your screen rather than just a, presentation. And that's going to be even more important to be able to see small text and small things. So this is just a tool. It's not saying, hey, in every room you need a video wall. It's just, this is a way to say, okay, well, let's actually fit the room with the right product. And, maybe it's not that big, but either way, this is just as a demonstration to show how we're able to use this in real time, saving the time in the design process and really in decision-making process, and kind of giving those tools to the decision makers, at the end user level, be able to, have all the information they need to be able to make, the right call for their space.
That's fantastic. Gage, anything you want to add about display technology, projectors, TVs, or LED?
Nothing specific. He covered most everything. The biggest thing to remember in rooms is line of sight. Making sure that, you can see over the person's head in front of you what's on the screen, and that the text is big enough to be visible. And that's kind of the most important things about all of this.
Yeah, Nathan, can you illustrate that for us?
Yeah, sure. Here's some of those things. So some of these features that we're able to do, talking about direct line of sight, I'm just going to throw this projector back up on the wall just for giggles. So I've got the projector up, dim the lights again slightly. So this, there's several different tools that we're able to showcase and use. And obviously in any conference room, you're pretty much going to have, this type of problem where you're having to look around someone's head. It's not really ideal, in this type of form factor to be able to, see a screen in the center of the room. So in a room like this, maybe it's something where we make it easier on everyone. If we're only using one screen for output, maybe we actually do two. Duplicate that and make it easier for everyone to see. Or it could be something as simple as, I don't want these, to be on this wall. Maybe we actually move them and put them on these walls. So there's lots of ways to be able to design out these rooms and figure out your best viewpoint. There's some of the tools kind of built in that we're able to do. We can show sight lines. We can show viewing angles. Let's see here. If I throw in your horizontal viewing angle, I can do a vertical viewing angle, so it shows optimal viewpoints for images. So yeah, really great tools to be able to use that, to be intentional when you're building out a space rather than just throwing some chairs, table, and a TV on the wall.
That's great. And yeah, all this really is to help our customers visualize their rooms and their systems. Right. And so that's the use of all this technology. Gage, if you could talk for a minute, because when we're discussing video conferencing, we do talk about the platform that you use. We talk about the display that will be in the room. But another important feature in a video conferencing system is a camera, because it's a two-way video communication, and so there are different options and different applications for cameras. Talk to us about how what the differences are in cameras.
Yeah. So typically in meeting spaces, you're going to have a few different types of cameras. There are PTZ cameras, or pan, tilt, zoom, and then there are fixed lens cameras. And so those would be, like a webcam or something equivalent to that. In a room the size that we're showing on the screen now, you'd want a PTZ camera so that you could, have different presets to show different areas of the room. So you could focus in on a person speaking, and then focus back on the whole group when it's a group conversation. Fixed cameras are a lot better for smaller conference rooms. If you have a little meeting space that holds 3 or 4 people, then a fixed camera would be a good option. But typically, you're going to want to be able to integrate a nice PTZ in a room like this, and you really need hardware to do that. You can't just grab any old PTZ camera and plug it into your computer and expect it to work. So that just kind of, furthers the argument that hardware is still the better option in larger spaces like this, especially with the rest of the technology. So, when you're looking for a camera, you want something that's got pretty decent optical zoom. You don't want to rely heavily on digital zoom, because the more digital zoom you use, the more artifacts you're going to see as you zoom in. So optical zoom is physically the glass of the camera zooming in instead of, the sensor trying to do the digital zoom itself. So you want to make sure your camera has good optical zoom, not digital zoom, and that it is properly spec'd for the field of view of your room. You don't want a camera that has a super narrow field of view if you're going to be close to the camera, because that means you're going to have a small slice of the room, not the entire room itself. You'll typically find that PTZ cameras have a moderate field of view, so they're pretty in the middle. And then the fixed cameras kind of range from the really narrow to the super wide, depending on what your needs are. So.
And when you're doing a video conference, you really want to give the person on the other end of the call the feeling that they're in the room with you. And so
that's correct.
That dictates a lot of the exact type of camera you use and
it
the location
it does.
Installed in.
The positioning is really the most important thing. We're not privileged enough to have in the middle of the screen cameras yet. So, you're going to have to sacrifice a little bit on placement. Typically, you'll find that people either want just above eye level as a placement, which usually means you're going to have to be off to the left or the right-hand side of the screen, so that you can raise the camera up a bit. In this room in particular, it's on the credenza that's in front, and that gives, when everybody's seated, a pretty good view. But even in this instance, it's just a little low. You're going to kind of be right at nose level with most of the people in the room. So even in this position, the camera placement's not super ideal. You would really want to be up just above eye level of everybody in the room. But, you kind of have to make a compromise here, because there's just no way to get the camera right in the middle of the screen. So placement's really the most important part.
Yeah, great. And so, moving on from cameras, let's talk a little bit about audio transmission with microphones. A lot of options here and different reasons to use different products. Gage, talk to us just a little bit about the differences in mic options for rooms like this, conference spaces and presentation spaces.
Sure. There's a million different things to talk about here, but I'll try to keep it pretty simple. You have a few different types of mics that you typically are going to run into: table-mounted microphones, ceiling-mounted microphones, and in some cases, if this is an instructional space, you might have lavalier microphones or head-worn microphones on the presenter, if this is more of a training space, right? But in typical video conferencing applications, you're going to see either a mic on the ceiling or on the table. And we'll start with the table. So if you just have a standard microphone on a table, and you have what's called an omnidirectional pickup pattern, meaning it picks up from all directions, then you're going to end up with a lot of table noise and a lot of room ambient noise and, paper shuffling and things like that. There are some fixes for this. You can get what are called cardioid or directional microphones that have multiple elements. So you could place several directional microphones in different orientations on the table to pick up purely vocal noises and to try to ignore some of that table noise. The other option is what's called the toroidal microphone, meaning that it looks kind of like a donut. So it picks up sort of a donut shape around the microphone. And the final thing that we've been using a lot of are beamforming microphones. They make beamforming microphones for the table and the ceiling. And I think Nathan's going to go ahead and pull in a beamforming mic first now.
Yeah, so this is this example is a Shure MXA 910. They make different versions of this. This is a ceiling mount version. They make a CXA 310. for the table that gives a very similar demonstration, very similar patterns of pickup and control. And one of the great things about this, we've experienced this in our own conference room and had to have these conversations with lots of clients, lots of customers who may have a large room similar to this, and they think, okay, we need to just get a better microphone that just picks up more. We need more of a better condenser mic to pick up more. Well, no, that's just going to pick up more reflections in the room. So one of the things you can do to combat that is do some type of acoustic treatment in the room, kind of like we've got represented here, to absorb some of that. And then the other, most important thing you can do if you have that type of issue is get something that, like Gage mentioned, is a beamforming microphone, and I'll show how that's demonstrated here. So let's just say, for example, we have someone sitting down at the foot of the table, and we only have maybe 3 people in the room that need to be speaking that's actually presented in a meeting, and then everyone else, there's going to be folders moving around, people squeaking their chairs. There's things that you just don't want to be picked up in that live atmosphere. So what I can do is select that beamforming microphone, and actually through software, and we create presets for these to make it simple for customers to use. But we can actually show representation of where we want the pickup pattern to actually be directed. So maybe we have a person standing there. Everyone outside of that beam formation would be emitted, basically canceled from the pattern. So you only hear what's in the pickup pattern. And maybe we have another person closer to the head of the table that needs to be picked up. And let's put just one more person over here just for reference. Or let's just put, how about this?
While Nathan's doing that, let's talk about the 2 different specific types of technology that beamforming microphones offer. There used to be, companies would build one or the other. Now they're kind of starting to converge a little bit, especially Shure. There are tracking mics, and then there are beamforming lobed microphones, meaning that you can aim the microphone yourself, or you can have the microphone automatically adjust to the loudest source in the room. And there are some filters they use to try to recognize human speech, as the source to target. So what Nathan is showing you here is an aimed lobe microphone, and we could adjust these lobes based on the configuration of the room. So the other thing that's great about this is if you have a meeting space that has configurable tables, if you want to break out into smaller groups or have work tables and turn this into a training space, you can still use this microphone in the same place that it's in, and you can just move the lobes around to where the tables are positioned. The other technology is tracking, and like I said, that's just going to try to track human speech the best it can. And the algorithms for both are really good. They use a ton of microphone elements in these mics and some clever, a little bit of black magic and a little bit of phase alignment to aim that microphone in a really small pattern around the room. So Nathan, continue.
I'm sorry. There we go. No, that was pretty much it. I just wanted to be able to showcase, a little bit of just a visual on what that we mean by saying, beam formation and, and steering the audio. A lot of people hear that and they don't really understand what that means. And so this is just a really great way to be able to show, in a very live room, how controlled you can actually be with your microphone pickups.
Now, this is no substitute for acoustic treatment. It does seriously damp your problems that you're going to experience in a very live, reverberant room, but it is not a replacement. This, in combination with acoustic treatment, is basically one of the better ways to go.
Right.
Great. Now, after Nathan showed us that, there is one other type of mic you'll see pretty common in a ceiling, and that's usually, like we talked about before, a directional microphone. And I just wanted to point out real quickly, the problem with this is that you have a mic hanging down, pointing in a general location. You pick up a ton of ambient noise, a lot of air conditioner noise and things like that. So I just want to make people aware of that.
That's great. Yep.
Gage, do we see a lot of people try to do all this on their own? And
Absolutely.
they just end up, getting the wrong mic and then trying to shout at microphones or struggle to hear on the other end? I mean, do we see that a lot?
Absolutely. I've seen people huddle around an iPad in a conference room for meetings. I mean, it's what people, especially right now, what people are attempting to do is just not always correct. And, they're doing their best. But having specific spaces that are built for these situations make your meetings far more enjoyable and productive, because you're not spending the entire time adjusting settings and trying to get people to talk louder if they're on one end of the room, things like that.
Yeah, but I think that's important, in a new reality right now where we're not in the room as much with the people we need to meet with. We're not traveling as much to go on location to meetings, trying to improve the quality and the way the equipment works, I think is really important right now and will pay off big time for people that are willing to make some additions and maybe that are making some investments into their infrastructure right now to improve the quality of their meetings and video conferencing.
I agree.
Let's talk to another important part of this is how we hear each other in these calls. So let's talk a little bit about sound. There are a number of options, again, with this idea of how we get sound that the people in the meeting can hear. So talk to us about speaker options for presentation and video conferencing.
Okay. So a lot of people, try to go into these types of spaces, plug an HDMI into the TV, into their laptop, and just have the sound coming out of the TV. There are a few problems with this. One, TV speakers aren't great. They're a lot better now than they used to be, but they're not great. They typically use the reflection off the back wall to try to increase the low end and general frequency response of the source, and it generally ends up sounding a little weird and phased out and things like that. So it's typically better to have a dedicated audio solution, and there are a few different ones that Nathan has in this room. There are ceiling speakers as a typical type of speaker, so it's usually just a 6 or 8 inch speaker with about between 90 and 100 degree conical coverage. So it's depending on your ceiling height, you don't need a ton of these. They do pose a few challenges. They fire directly at large flat surfaces such as floors and tables. And you have to be careful about your speaker overlap, because you can gaps and overlap. You can either have not enough to cover the room, or you can have too many, and you can end up with some weird phasing at ear level. And the other option, of course, is wall-mounted speakers. There are sound bars, in-wall speakers, surface mount wall speakers. And those are more traditional, where you would have a sound source coming from the location of the speaker. So at the TV, the person is speaking visually, and you hear that audio from the source area, which would be at the display location. We end up putting ceiling speakers in a lot more often than we do directional sources at the display, just because it cleans things up. You don't see them on the wall. Sound bars look okay, but sometimes, aesthetically it doesn't match the room. And so I'd say that most common is ceiling speakers, but obviously wall-mounted speakers are a solution if that's what your room requires.
Yeah, and again, it's important that everybody can hear each other in these situations, and so that's why we try to recommend a really good solution for your space, what really fits your space, and will help people be able to hear the important information that you're trying to convey in your meeting. Gage, you mentioned sound bars.
I did.
Of course, people are really familiar with those. They see a lot of those in homes now. Now it's a lot of residential application on those. But there are some that have built-in cameras.
Yes.
Have you ever worked with those and seen those used successfully?
Absolutely. Crestron, another company we use a lot of, has a pretty great soundbar that has a camera right in the middle, and that gets your camera in a really good position. It's just below the display. It's still below eye level usually, or right at eye level, because you don't typically hang a display, too low. So basically, you're usually still kind of looking up at the people that you're meeting with, which can form kind of a psychological intimidating thing, for the people on the other side, because you're looking down at them. So you want to make sure that mic or that camera position is pretty neutral, pretty close to eye level or just above. And again, with sound bars, they are a great solution. In a room this size, I wouldn't recommend it, because there are a ton of parallel surfaces that are flat and untreated. So sound bars can create, because they're not super directional. They can create issues, with reverberation. So, but they do work best in medium-sized meeting spaces.
Yeah. And so again, there's an application for that, and we've seen them used successfully in a number of installations. So that's definitely something for people to consider when they're looking at their systems.
I want to add a little thing here.
Yeah.
Typically, people get this pretty wrong as well. They like to have the room super, super loud with the person's voice. And what ends up happening is that, especially if the software you're using doesn't have good acoustic echo cancellation, you end up, hearing the person's voice out of the speakers very loudly. That audio goes back into your microphone and then makes it back to the far end, creating echo for that person. So they hear themselves speak naturally. Then it goes over to your side, gets into your microphone, and comes back to the other person. And usually there's a digital signal processing algorithm called acoustic echo cancellation that typically takes care of this. But the implementation in most modern soft codec things like Teams or Zoom or whatever is not very good. And so we typically like to promote the use of a digital signal processor, or DSP, that allows your integrator greater control over the final audio that you're going to experience in that space. So another plug for hardware, but it really is a better solution. So,
yeah, great. Well, thanks. And let's talk briefly here at the end about control systems. So many people that use these rooms, they're not tech whizzes. They don't know how to do everything. They just want to be able to go into a room, to turn everything on, to have a meeting, and for it to be successful. And so how do we, as S&L Integrated, how do we help our customers successfully control their spaces in a very easy way?
One of our parts of our mission statement and our values is that we want to give the customer one button. So we want to make things easy to use. So all of our interfaces are aimed to be simple. We would typically install what's called a touch panel or a button panel somewhere in the system, and that would allow the user, as Nathan's showing right there on the table, that would allow the user a point of interface with the system. So typically people do this with remotes, and remotes get lost, or they walk out of the room, or they happen to be the same remote that's used for this other thing in the building. So let me just borrow this one for a while. And you end up not being able to turn your TV on or change the volume or anything like that. And so we always promote the use of a centralized control system that would allow you to interface with all of your audiovisual equipment from one place that never moves because it's dedicated to that system. And again, it usually presents itself in the form of a touch panel. They're usually between 7 and 10 inches and typically table mounted in systems like this. So Nathan's got had a nice little view of it for us on the stream. So those control systems would be able to do all the functions you would need. They would be able to make phone calls. They would be able to make video calls. They would be able to turn change the video input from wireless presentation to hardwired presentation. They would be able to turn the room level up or down, mute the microphone, all these things. And control systems give further function where they can perform automated things like make sure that your system is off at 2:00 in the morning every evening, so you make sure you're not leaving your gear on all the time. So there's a lot of advantages to a control system.
Yeah, they can even control elements of the room that we don't
absolutely
most often associate with AV, like lights, like the room light and shading in the room. And I think
John, turn around real quick, your little avatar to the back of the room.
So while Nathan's showing you what's happening here, this is a process that we dump into a bucket called environmental controls. And these can be the HVAC system, so your air conditioning, shades in your room. They can be lighting sources. They can be anything that's environmental or building specific can be controlled from these systems as well.
Yeah, and so that just gives the user more control of their space and
Absolutely.
a much easier, much simpler solution than, like I say, having to go to 2 or 3 different places and turn 5 or 6 different switches or buttons or knobs or dials. And we really strive to make it easy for our customers to use their equipment, and that every time they go in there, they know what kind of experience they're going to get. They don't have to hope and pray that their system's going to work this time. Man, we've covered a lot of ground today related to video conferencing and presentation spaces. And our main point for doing this today is just to share with you some information, some of the things that we've learned over the years, designing, building, and installing these types of systems and solutions. And if you're a business owner, a school, a church, anybody that's thinking about making some changes or investments into their video conferencing system or their presentation space, their conference rooms, we would love to have a conversation with you. We'd love to hear from you and to see how we can help make your dreams in your space become a reality. And we really believe that it is good stewardship of your resources to work with an integrator like S&L so that we can, like I say, make these spaces work the way you want them to or the way that you imagine they'll work in your mind. Nathan, Gage, anything else you guys want to say before we kind of wrap this up?
Yeah, I got just to tag on the end of that. Another thing that we really like doing, and this is also to benefit the customer, the end user, whoever is developing the space, is working with architects and general contractors. We it's always fun. If you already have an existing space, sometimes it's easy to kind of visualize what would happen in there, or based on the experience, you want to make some changes for the better. But one of the things that's difficult to do sometimes is actually to visualize spaces that do not exist. So that's another tool of this, if in new construction phases, to be able to model out to scale, those plans, so we can actually, budget for things properly and kind of overcome obstacles before we approach them in the field. This is one of those ways that we're actually able to find those things. In all room types, not just conference rooms or huddle rooms. But there's, in any room type that, with using technology, there's going to be obstacles to overcome. So getting in front of that, in planning phases by using, 3D models, that's one, valuable way to use this, and another reason to partner with great companies and, us in general. It's just something we're able to bring to the table early on. So that's one of the things that I really love about this, is just the ability to be able to use this before you're even able to see the space.
I'll elaborate on that a bit. A lot of people try to do this kind of stuff on their own, and that's okay to a point. But you really should try to find a great company to work with for these sorts of things, because ultimately it's going to improve your company's experience. It's going to reduce your downtime and your frustration levels, and it's just going to ultimately end in a better experience. So I would just encourage everyone to try to find a great integrator, preferably us.
Absolutely.
To work on the project.
We're partial to ourselves.
Absolutely.
That's great, man. I just want to thank Gage and Nathan so much for walking us through this today. I think it's been very informative, very helpful. John, thank you for running our VR camera today. I want to invite you to take a look at SLintegrated.com or look us up on Facebook, S&L Integrated Systems. This week we have a great feature coming up. Tomorrow, Gage is going to be back on answering questions with Ask the Expert. He's going to be talking, I think, Gage, a little bit more about VTC audio. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that, Gage will be back on tomorrow answering some questions. We would love to get to know you. Like I say, S&L Integrated, we're in Thomasville, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, Nashville, Tennessee, and we would love to get to know you and work with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day.